Hello and welcome to the only podcast doing a mock draft. We first wanted to come up with the idea mock draft, and I'm very excited to get into this. We have a lot of fun for this show. We're going to have a worst take of the week, so whoever says the worst take has the worst pick. Let us know in the comments below. There'll be a thread I put in there, so let us know who had the worst take. Loser is going to have to watch a section of a game from the winner's choosing, so that should be a lot of fun. Also, we're going to get some questions from you guys. I have that in there. I didn't tell you that, Kyle, pre-show, but I figured you wouldn't mind. And yeah, so we're just going to get into it. And Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. I am, sobbing every night while talking myself into Jared Stidham as a future NFL quarterback, like a lot of Patriots faithful. But, outside of that, I'm doing good.
Yes.
Good.
So we'll get the mock draft started. And you told me pre-show, and I already forgot. So am I doing the odds, or are you doing the odds?
I was thinking I could do the odds and you could do the
Okay.
evens. That way you could pick Tampa Bay and I can pick New England.
Gotcha. Okay, so you go ahead. Very tough decision with the first overall pick with, Bengals. Who are they going to select? Or who would you select? I should clarify before we get into it. We're going to select what we would do if we were in their shoes, not necessarily what we think is going to actually happen. So, yeah, with that, Kyle, take the floor.
Yeah, I feel like the first three moves are going to be locks in my eyes, at least the first two. The first two moves to me are locks, and the obvious one is Joe Burrow going number one, setting season at LSU, and he looks awesome as a prospect, and he's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. Potentially, I guess I should say. We never really know with quarterbacks, but yeah, the Bengals are going to take him number one. That's my expert analysis. Is Joe Burrow should go to the Bengals.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to say what hasn't already been said about him. He's great. I was very high on him. I've kind of gotten a little bit lower, but I still think that he's a really good quarterback. He's has the biggest chance of being a superstar out of any of the quarterbacks available. It just makes sense. And we'll just go ahead and move on to number two, another obvious one. I think that it would be insane not to pick these two guys with top two picks. Chase Young going to the Washington Redskins, edge rusher out of Ohio State. Again, it's kind of like what you said with Joe Burrow. It's like, how do you really have an expert opinion on this guy when we can all agree that he's great? Just watch any select game and he'll be in the backfield all game. He's amazing, and he's honestly probably a bigger prospect than Nick Bosa. So this would be a huge get for Washington with the number two overall pick.
Yeah, I had a couple friends who were trying to tell me that Washington should look at trading back and getting a different player like later and try and see like how much are people willing to pay for these quarterbacks, especially when realistically you could see three. Maybe you could talk yourself into Jordan Love also for the fourth quarterback in like 10 picks. But I would honestly, I would eat like manure if Chase Young isn't taken in the like top three picks. Like this guy is just, Nick Bosa was defensive rookie of the year by far and a potential defensive player of the year candidate. He was kind of on the outside, but there was rumblings about it. And Chase Young was better than him at Ohio State. So there's just no way Chase Young's not getting taken. So I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty obvious pick. Let's go ahead and move on to number three. This is your selection. You said this was obvious. I do not think this is obvious. One thing I also didn't mention at the top of the show, we're not doing trades in this mock draft. It's just going to be we select who is available. So another thing, maybe I think this situation, the Lions probably should trade back, but we're not doing trades here. So you said this pick was kind of obvious. I would like to hear what you have to say because I don't really know where they would go here.
So I think the obvious solution is this pick's going to be a trade. They obviously felt comfortable enough with Jeff Okudah that they're going to probably, because I think you can trade back and still get Okudah. Not that Okudah is like being overvalued at 3, because I think he's a legitimate shutdown corner. I just think that with the dire needs teams are going to be to get ahead of the Chargers or get ahead of the Dolphins, that this is just an obvious trade candidate. And I still think that Detroit can move back to 5, 6. If you look at some of the other teams that might look at quarterbacks, 9, And if you go further and further back, I still think they can get Okudah at those spots because I don't think a lot of the teams behind him really need cornerbacks. So I think Okudah is the obvious pick for Detroit. It's just whether or not they're going to take him at 3 or if they're going to take him at a later pick.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. But so if this is your pick, you got it. You're on the clock. Who are you going to select? You have to select someone with the 3 overall pick. Can't trade back, even though that would make sense.
I'm still going to take Okudah with that one. I still think, he fits the obvious need for Detroit. Like I said, they just traded Slay. They obviously felt comfortable enough with Okudah and his tape, his skill set that they could trade Slade and then bring in Slay, and then bring in the number 1 corner, the shutdown cornerback for them. So I still pick Okudah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I mean, it was either him or Simmons for me. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think they're both great players. Again, they could probably get either one of those guys trading back a little bit, trading to 5 or 6. That's probably what's going to happen. But since we're not doing trades, kind of throws a little wrench into that plan. So now we'll move on. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do love to come up with fake trades in my head that no one's ever going to do, but I think they should happen. So there was a thing circulating around ESPN a couple weeks ago that Miami was obsessed with Joe Burrow.
Okay.
Right? And I was thinking, what would it take for Cincinnati to actually make that play? So I was thinking, and I want to hear who. So if this is a conference call, which GM is hanging up first? Miami trades or Cincinnati gets the number 3 and number 26 pick, plus Miami's next year's first. Detroit gets 5 and 18, and Miami gets the number 1 pick. Who hangs up first?
Let's see. So Detroit gets 5. So this is you have 3 teams now in this, so it's getting a little bit complicated. Honestly, I feel like that trade doesn't make sense for the Dolphins or the Bengals. Like, I think that the Dolphins are kind of team that they just need to accumulate as many assets as possible and trading up and trading assets to get Burrow as opposed to Tua, or just waiting a year and getting a quarterback next year would put them in a worse position. And I also think for Cincinnati, I don't think they're as bad as people are kind of making them out to be. I think they had a lot of injuries last year, and I think they're better off just sticking with Burrow. So I don't know. They both hang up at the same time.
Interesting.
Except for Detroit.
Yeah. This trade will never happen just because of the PR stuff that all these teams will have to deal with. But if I'm Cincinnati and I even consider trading the number 1 pick, if I'm getting 3 first-rounders out of it, like especially with one of them being the number 3 pick, that's something I think have a conversation about before I say no. But anyway, so we move on to number 4.
Yes. No, I like it. I like the tangent. But yeah, I will move on to number 4. This one's an interesting one. I mean, I do think that Simmons is the best player on the board, but I don't think that they really need him that much, especially because they have Jabril Peppers, who already kind of fits that half safety, half linebacker role. I think they go tackle here. And my favorite tackle in this draft is Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. I know that there's a lot of good tackles higher up. He's the one that I like the best. I think he's just a big, strong guy who has great footwork, can move side to side very well. And I think he would go a long way in terms of protecting Daniel Jones, who, the line has had, it's not terrible, but it's had its struggles, especially at the tackle position.
Interesting. Okay. So Thomas is your pick?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I had Simmons pegged down for this one, but I understand the pick with Thomas. He obviously does a lot of things well that will protect Daniel Jones, like you said. I personally, my favorite tackle in this draft is Mekhi Becton, just because, a lot of people are going to tab him as the combine darling that's going to get overdrafted. But I just don't think you can teach, like, the size and speed that he has. I think that guy's going to be a game changer at the tackle position. But, I mean, Thomas was hyped from very early on, and seems to be probably close to, I think there's 4 draft, and then it really drops off. So if you get one of those 4, I think you should be happy in the first round.
Yeah, exactly. I really do. I agree. I think you can't go wrong with any of those top 4. Thomas is my favorite. If you think Becton's better, if you think, Willis or Wirfs are better, you can make arguments for all of them, but that's who I consider to be the better player. And then let's move on to number 5. Miami, team we talked about. They do have Tua on the board. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I think it is. So they have 3 picks in this draft. I think the 3 things they need to address is obviously the quarterback position, whether it's a guy to grow under a year under Fitzmagic or they're going to start him right away. I think he's going to get a year under Fitzmagic. I think they're going to address a receiver, and I think they're going to address someone to protect whatever quarterback they're investing in. That's why they got 3 picks. It works out for them that way. But I think two is the obvious one. I've said this before. I feel like at face value, if I had to pick between Joe Burrow and Tua, I am actually pretty close to even on those two. I think Tua is accurate with the ball. I think the way he reads the defense is pretty incredible. Even like he came into a national championship game as a backup, cold turkey, looked off 2 safeties and delivered a dime for a game-winning touchdown pass. Like you just don't teach that kind of poise to a kid. And I just think, the 2 questions I have with Tua are obviously the health, which
Did we lose Kyle?
then the other one is my back.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but continue going.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I just think with the way he can perform, and I lost my train of thought, but I'm going to still go through this.
It's okay.
I think that he's on tap. He's on the same level as Burrow for me as in terms of prospect, but the health concerns do dock him down. I still think he's a number 2 quarterback in this draft because I don't really like the other 2 that much that are talked about for first round picks. So I'm going with Tua for Miami.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love Tua. If he wasn't injured, if he didn't have those injuries, he's the sure bet number 1 overall pick, in my opinion. But he has those injuries. And it is the ultimate risk-reward type move. If you go all in and you hit it, I mean, you probably have a franchise quarterback for the next decade plus. And if you miss, then you just wasted a very high pick. Cooper Harold asked for his question, who do you think has the biggest bust potential? In my opinion, I believe it's Love and Espenza. To me, I think it's Tua. I think that Tua has the biggest bust potential because if he gets injured and can't stay healthy and falls off, then he's not going to be anything. But of course, if he is able to stay healthy, he's going to be a great player. So it's such a risk, but it's such a fun pick, I think.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, injuries obviously puts the big question mark on him. I still think my bust is probably going to be your next pick here. If you want to go ahead and segue into that, I'm not a huge Justin Herbert guy.
We lost you again for a second there, but yeah. So you said at the end of it, you said you're not a big Justin Herbert guy, and I am not either, which is why I'm not going to be selecting him with the number 6 overall pick. Instead, I'm going Jedrick Willis. I'm going tackle again here. I think that again he's my number 2 tackle I have on the board. I like his athleticism. I like how he can move up. I think that he's a really good tackle. And I think that this is definitely a position of need for the Chargers. They've clearly made it a key effort to improve that line. They're probably, again, if I was predicting what I think is going to happen, I'd probably go with Herbert. I'm not a big Herbert guy, so I'm not going to take him here.
Okay. Well, then to answer the question, yeah, I feel like Herbert, I've just watched Herbert play enough really bad games against really bad teams that I'm just out. And that's just my personal opinion on that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I agree. We can get into Herbert a little bit later, assuming he gets drafted in the first round. Yeah. What is your take on Willis, though?
Willis is another one. Like I said, I feel like it's a 4-tackle draft. If you get one of the 4, you pick your favorite one, and that's the one you stick with. If you get one of your guy, I'm perfectly okay with the tackle pick. I think that makes a lot of sense for the Chargers. They'll get a chance to learn from a professional in Bakhtiari, who they just signed, and he's going to get a chance to learn there. Also, probably play the other tackle position, he'll play left tackle, and then he'll slot right in, and it'll be good to go. If you want that cornerstone piece, it's interesting to me that if they're not taking a quarterback in the draft, I feel like they would have signed a veteran by now. So, do you think that
they have Tyrod Taylor? I think he's probably the guy they're just going to go with.
Interesting. I'm not sure I'm all for that without Los Angeles, but I understand the logic. I like Willis, though. That's a good pick.
All right. Now, number 7, Carolina Panthers. Who do you got?
Derek Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game-changing defensive tackle. I think he's the best. He's the best defensive lineman not named Chase Young in this draft. And in a lot of other drafts, he's probably a top 5 pick. The guy is just a game changer at the defensive tackle position, and I think he could be really dominant in this Carolina defense that probably needs a little more muscle in the interior. So I'm going with Derek Brown.
I love Derek Brown. I think he's great, and it's a position of need for sure. I think Simmons is still on the board right here, so I think this is now an interesting thing of how far back is he going to go. But in terms of, I think Carolina would be ecstatic if they get him with this pick, without a doubt, because I do think that he is a very good player.
All right. Yeah, I'm definitely in. I think Brown's going to be a difference maker there.
Okay, so now we'll move on. We'll go ahead to the number 8 overall pick, Arizona here. And this is a tough one for me. It really is. Because they have, obviously, I think Arizona is thinking, let's get a tackle here. And you still have Wirfs and Becton still on the board right here. You could draft one of those two. But the other side is that you have Isaiah Simmons, who I think has now fallen. And this is a great value pick. And so I think this is a very interesting thing. They could use, to me, I think Simmons is a safety who can play linebacker from time to time. I do think that would be a good fit. This is a tough one for me, but I think I'm just going to go best player available and go with Simmons here.
Yeah, if you're looking at the value as the number 8 pick for Isaiah Simmons, that's an excellent pick. I think that if they're getting that to add to that defense, I did have a tackle penned in for them originally, because I do think they need to address that issue, especially to protect their, Kyler Murray, their franchise quarterback. But if you're getting Isaiah Simmons at 8, then I call that in immediately. That's 32nd draft pick.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I didn't have him with the Cardinals at all, but that's kind of the fun of doing this together like this, where, I don't have Derek Brown going to the Panthers, but now that he gets selected, now Simmons fall, it's just more interesting scenarios play out when you do something like this. It's very similar to the actual NFL draft. Sometimes things don't go how you expect them to go.
Yep. And then, so with number 9, I think Jacksonville was hoping and praying somehow that Simmons actually fell into their lap. And then he goes right before, because I think that would actually be a really awesome player and make up for a lot of, all of a sudden there's a Jacksonville defense that they now need to fill. But now that that's gone, I think they're going Jerry Jeudy. I think this is, this is the wide receiver draft of probably our generation. There's just so many good wide receivers, and Jacksonville needs the guy. And DJ Chark was really good for them, and we're gonna see how he develops. But if you're buying into Gardner Minshew as this guy, you need to make sure you have a 1A option next to him. And so Jerry Jeudy's that guy. He's an excellent route runner. He has great hands. He's so smooth. I've never seen such a smooth wide receiver in college football. And yeah, he's going to be the first receiver taken off the board for me. So I go with Jerry Jeudy. Yeah,
I'm right on you with the Jerry Jeudy, also my favorite wide receiver in this draft. Again, the route running is just spectacular. It was a little bit surprising. I think a lot of Jaguars fans would want to bolster the offensive line. But at the same time, I think you got a receiver that could potentially, be a superstar. His upside is Hall of Fame. I'm not saying he will, but that's his upside. So I like that pick a lot. Oh, and we'll move right ahead to number 10 here. Number 10, Mekhi Becton out of Louisville, tackle, of course, going to the Cleveland Browns. It's a position of need. They need an offensive lineman. And again, this is now the third tackle that I've selected. And it makes sense to me. This is the position of need, probably maybe the best player available as well. So this is kind of just the best of both worlds at this point.
Yeah, I had Becton going as high as 8, and he could go even higher if one of these teams decide to go offensive tackle. I just think, he's an absolute freak. He can fit into almost any scheme because he's so freakishly athletic. I like the pick there with Cleveland. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. And, the one of, I did have the thought of maybe they could go with one of the receivers, try to get a stacked receiving core, but I just think this makes sense. And so we'll move ahead to number 11, the New York Jets. Where are you going here, Kyle?
Yeah, I think so. I said this was a 4-tackle draft for me. Depending on how you feel about Josh Jones at Houston, this could be 5 tackles. But to me, it's a 4-tackle draft, like I said, and we're going to take them all in the first 11 picks. I'm going Tristan
Okay.
Wirth out of Iowa. So 4 tackles in the first 11 picks. I think this is an obvious need and an obvious hole to fill for the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets have 2 obvious holes, I think, with both the tackle position and the receiver position. It seems very unlikely they won't get at least one great player in the first round to fill one of those 2 holes. Wirfs is great. Again, he was obviously the 4th tackle on my board because I've selected 3 already, but I still do really like him. I think they're all 4 great. I think if you get one of those 4, you're going to be happy. There is, let's get into why did you select Wirfs as opposed to someone like Ruggs or CeeDee Lamb? Is it just that it's going to be more difficult? You don't want to protect Sam Darnold? What was the decision making there?
Yeah, I feel like with the Jets, there's 10 receivers that I feel really good about, taking at some point in the first few rounds that I can get and plug into my offense. They may not be a number 1 option receiver, but they're ready to go week 1. But there's, like I said multiple times, there's 4 tackles. So if the first 3 are getting taken, I feel like at that point, the most important thing to me is not who Sam Darnold is throwing to, but who's protecting Sam Darnold, because he's constantly running for his life in this team. So I feel like if those 3 tackles are getting taken before him, I'm jumping on that 4th tackle, and I'm going to worry about wide receiver in the next couple rounds.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right move. You can probably get a good receiver in the 2nd round. It seems unlikely you're going to get a good tackle in the 2nd round. And, I mean, the reality is I'm never going to hate on a team for selecting a tackle, especially when it's the Jets, who have just been such a mess on the offensive side of the ball, trying to help Darnold out. I mean, probably the worst situation in the NFL last year was Sam Darnold as quarterback. So I don't hate it at all. And now let's move on to another team that could really use a wide receiver. And so that's what I'm going to do here with the Las Vegas Raiders, not the Oakland Raiders. The 2 guys on the board, Ruggs and CeeDee Lamb, I like them both. I do think I'm going to go with Henry Ruggs III here. Part of me, there is a little bit of me that worries about one of the things that people keep talking about, what they love about CeeDee Lamb is just that his ability to move in space. I kind of worry about when he goes to better talented defenders, can he make as many moves as he made against college level defenders? And obviously he won't make as many, but will he still be able to have that be a big part of his game? I'm just not entirely sure.
I can understand it. That's a fair pick. I have some. I'm not 100% sure on Henry Ruggs. I feel like at times he felt like the number 3 guy in Alabama to me. And I'm just a huge fan of Jalen Waddle, who's probably going to be in the draft next year and be a high pick next year. So that's just my feeling on Ruggs. And I feel like you said, a lot of people, the big thing on the CeeDee Lamb is he's always open, it seems like. And not only is he open, he seems wide open by like 15 yards every time. And I don't know how he keeps doing it, but that's the guy I would take personally. But I understand the appeal to Ruggs. His speed is obviously a game changer. The Raiders have never shied away from a fast receiver. Shout out to Darius Hayward-Bay. And so I'm okay with that pick. That seems like a very likely pick for the Raiders.
Yeah, and what am I just part of the reason for CeeDee Lamb? Part of the reason why he's getting open by 15 yards is because they're creating plays that are getting defenders to screw up. I mean, you don't get open by 15 yards because you ran a great route. Almost never. It's usually because someone else screwed up. I do think that him playing for Oklahoma, that helped him. Again, it's not like Ruggs is in a bad situation playing for Alabama, but yeah, you can't go wrong with either of the guys. I decided to go with Ruggs.
Yeah, that's a fair pick. And then so we had back-to-back tackles 10 and 11, and then I'm going to take back-to-back receivers 12 and 13. This is CeeDee Lamb for me. I think this is now San Francisco's pick, and I think that's a pretty solid pick for San Francisco. It's direct swap for what they had with Emmanuel Sanders. He's going to fill in, and that's a pretty dynamic receiving core for, if they decide Jimmy G's the guy very long term. You have Deebo Samuel and CeeDee Lamb, 2 great names and 2 really good receiving options going forward for the next few years to pair next to Kittle.
It's what I would do if I was in this spot. For the 49ers, I think at 13, they're just hoping one of those 3 receivers falls to them. Obviously, they probably have their preference, but that's just the hope for them. And I do think that this makes a lot of sense. They could really use like a number 1 guy. I think Samuel at times has looked like a number 1 guy. most times he looks like a good number 2 guy. So I do think that maybe CeeDee Lamb could be that number 1 guy. Now you have Samuel in a number 2 role, which I think he would thrive more in, and you can actually get a better receiving core, especially with Emmanuel Sanders gone. This makes a ton of sense to me.
Yep.
All right.
So now this is your team here at 14.
Yes, my team at 14. This is kind of the worst case scenario for Tampa Bay, I think, with all 4 of the tackles already off the board. I also think that there is an outside shot that they do go with Lamb, Ruggs, or Judy, despite having such a good receiving core. They need a number 3 guy, and I think that, there is some logic behind let's just be great at something. But given what we have on the board, the 2 guys I'm looking at would be Javon Kinlaw and CJ Henderson. I do think that they're both very good players. I think I'm going to go with Kinlaw here. I think that, for one thing, now you have a defensive line consisting of Kinlaw, Sue, Vade in the middle, with Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul on the edge, and already, maybe the best pair of middle linebackers in the game with Devin White and Levante David. I think this front 7 is already good. Make it even better. Again, it's not the dream scenario, but this is something that it would be a lot of fun to have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in on that pick. That's a good one. Kinlaw's a difference maker. He's the number 2 defensive lineman in this defensive line, or number 3 defensive lineman, in this draft. Young, and I think that's a good fit. There's the interesting thing with how our mock draft is going is I think there's a lot of different angles the Buccaneers can take. So I originally had Andrew Thomas penned in. When I was writing out 32 picks, I had Andrew Thomas here. And obviously that's your guy, and you'd be ecstatic with that pick.
Right.
But obviously with the tackles off the board, I know you're an anti-running back value guy. Is there a conference call on DeAndre Swift?
No, I think there is some logic behind Swift or Dobbins, but I think if they were to do that, I think the move would be to trade down 10 spots, get a second round pick, and get somebody then. I think that that's probably the way I would go about it. But, I don't think that there's no value in getting a running back. 14's a little early for me, but, in the 20s, I don't hate it, especially if you really like a running back. And in a position like Tampa Bay, they could use a running back. So I don't hate that. I wouldn't hate that at all if they did that.
And then the last question I had, based off of how our mock draft is going now, is there some thoughts here about Justin Herbert? I know you said you're not a huge fan, and I'm not either. But if you're getting him at 14, is there thoughts there? You have a 43-year-old quarterback. You might as well get ready to start grooming in a new guy to take his place one day.
I just think the way Tampa Bay is set up, they're trying to win today. They're trying to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years. I don't think they're trying to be competitive for the next 10 years. And honestly, that's the way I like to run a team. I like to be good this year. I'll worry about next year. Without, don't go crazy. Don't mortgage the future. But that's the way I like to look at things. And I do think that, again, is it good value? Perhaps. Maybe this is a good time to trade back and get someone who wants Justin Herbert to, overpay for him. But I just think let's get a good defensive lineman. Kinlaw, his highlights are the best out of any defensive lineman other than Chase Young. Like, his highlights are insane. He's not as consistent as someone like Brown, but he's like when he wins, he dominates, and he is absolutely someone, especially with he'll get a lot of one-on-one matchups playing on that defensive line, and I think he could just really thrive. I just think that would be the best thing for Tampa Bay in 2020, so that's why I'm making that pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the obvious needs for Tampa Bay when it comes to running back and offensive tackle, but if you can have like that really dominant defensive line, you can address both of those options later. So I'm okay. I like that pick a lot. With Denver, the next pick, I'm going with CJ Henderson, the Florida quarterback. I think he's the best shutdown quarterback. He has pretty good length. He's got really good speed. He runs a 4.3. I think it was a 4.39 40 that he was clocked at the combine. And the questions with him are: is he a willing tackler up front? And why did his ball skills get worse throughout his career at Florida? He started with 4 picks his first year, and then that slowly started going down. But he had a lot of pass defense over the past couple of years, even when he was playing hurt this past year, most of the year. I think he's going to be I think he's a pretty good cornerback here. I think he's pretty good. He's very good in coverage, and I think he's the obvious pick here for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and I'll even go one step further. I think the concern about the interceptions or whatever, I think is overrated. I've seen this so many times he'll be out of position and then find a way to come back and make a play. He's great at coming back to the ball, great at making those tight windows turning into no windows. I'm a big CJ Henderson fan. I think that's a great pick for Denver, and I think that they'd be very happy with him. So we'll move ahead to number 16, the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to try to pronounce this name. The names are tough for me. Kalavon Chason. Am I getting it right? Getting it close in any way? The edge rusher. I think you're close, yeah. Okay, close is all I need. The edge rusher out of LSU. I might not know how to pronounce his name, but I definitely know that watching his tape, he is just a very, very good player. Somebody that I think this is a position of need. They could definitely use someone on that defensive line. He's got really good speed. He's got a great motor, which I think is something that's a bit underrated sometimes when talking about defensive linemen. This is someone who he doesn't quit on any play, definitely not. And I think that he could be a huge impact. I think this could be a very good pick for Atlanta.
Yeah, I like the pick. I had him actually going next to Dallas based on but he's a very good edge rusher, and I think he's going to be very good. He was really good at the end of the year. I think he had 4.5 sacks his last 4 games, and I think he's going to be really good in the pros. And he's a great pass rusher.
Mm-hmm. All right, so number 17.
So this is a weird spot for Dallas now. Dallas has I think a lot of different needs, but a lot of players that I don't think they really would want to go for at this level. That I think they have a Byron Jones sized hole at cornerback, but I don't think they're going to go with any of the cornerbacks available. I don't think any. I think they would have been very happy to have Chase on, but they don't have any. He was just taken as the edge rusher. So I'm going to go with Xavier McKinney with this one. I think he's a very good safety. He's very good in coverage. He can play a lot of different positions, and I think he's going to be very good in the Dallas defense as kind of like a Swiss Army knife, able to play some slot, play a deep safety. So I'm going to go with Xavier McKinney on this one.
Yeah, I like McKinney. I see him. He could be a great single safety back corner where he's a safety who's deep. He's a good IQ player. The only small thing that I've heard about him is he does give up openings underneath sometimes, but he can be that center fielder type, which I think there's a lot of value in that. I like this pick a lot, and I do think that this is something that they got HaHa Clinton-Dix. That's kind of who knows how well he can play. So I do think that adding McKinney, he has a good talent, and even if HaHa Clinton-Dix does well, that's just a 1-year deal, and now McKinney can be that guy, and you play 2 safeties anyways. So I like that pick a lot.
So now we're on to Miami's second pick.
Yes, Miami's second pick. There's a little bit of temptation to go with Justin Herbert here, even though they had Tua with the first pick, just to say let's just throw a couple shots at this. But I am not going to do that. I think the move here is Grant Delpit. He's the other safety who's on the board right here that I have high on my board. I think that Miami's in a situation where they could definitely use a safety. They actually had decent safety play last year, but it was 8 different guys all doing it. So it was a very weird situation that went on there. Delpit, I like him. He's a big guy, a big safety, 6'2", 213. He's physical. He plays even bigger. I just think that he's someone that could really benefit Miami. They're basically in a position where they can almost just go with best player available. I think he probably is best player available, and he has the talent, and he has the fit as well. So good fit, good talent. I just think this pick makes sense.
Yeah, he's one of the guys who has really slidden down the board throughout, it seems like the college football season all the way to now. He's just kept on going down and down. There was one point, I think I saw him pretty close to the top 5, and now obviously we have him going all the way down at 18. And I like him, and it seems like he's a good guy, and he has moments that he looks awesome. But then there was also moments throughout the year. I don't know if it was fast-paced offense that was at LSU, but I just felt like there was a lot of times where he was getting burned, or the defense just did not look good, and they were giving up big passing plays. I think a lot of it is probably credited to how fast that LSU was playing on offense. But I do have questions about that and what happened with LSU's defense last year and him specific.
Yeah, those are some good concerns, I think. I think those are definitely some good things to bring up. We are getting to the point now, number 18, where the can't miss prospects are starting to go away. And you're going to probably find something wrong with a lot of the guys that are left. But yeah, going on to number 19, now it's time for the Las Vegas Raiders' second pick. A lot of guys they can choose from. Who do you got?
This is another one where I'm almost tempted to double up on receiver because that's how bad the receiving situation is right now. And there's so many good receivers, like Justin Jefferson as the 19th pick, I think would be awesome. But I'm just going to go with Trayvon Diggs on this one. I think that he's the next best cornerback up, and I think he's going to be very good on that defense. And I think the one question I have with him is some of his tackling, so this way he's able to play more coverage, and I think he's going to be very good in that Vegas defense.
Okay, I like that pick. I like it. I think that, again, the defense for the Raiders was underratedly terrible last year. I think that because of the way that they ran their offense, where they would run the ball so often, they had such a methodical approach that they wouldn't give up many drives. They might have had the worst defense in the NFL last year. It was at least top 5. I think it was the 3rd worst in DVOA. So improving that defensive side of the ball is definitely very important. It just kind of goes to show just how terrible they were a couple years ago. When you think of all the talent they've added and they still have a decent amount of holes. I mean, it just goes to show that being terrible for over a decade, it's hard to come back from that. But I do think this could be a step in the right direction. It's a little bit of a reach on my board, but I don't hate the pick at all. I do like Diggs.
Yeah, and I think that their linebacker play was just so horrible. Linebackers aren't the most essential position for picking, but when you don't have good linebackers, it makes a huge difference to your defense. And so now they got those 2 linebackers in free agency. I think Diggs could be a good cornerback on that roster. And then, now we're with the 3rd team with the second pick. We're on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, well, here, a little bit. Well, back up a second. I want to ask a question. Kyle, I think it's Sieka. Hard to pronounce. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. He asked, do you think the Raiders trade back for more picks? I think no, but what do you think about that question?
I understand the move. I mean, the thing is I just feel like this team has too many spots that they could. I'm all for accumulating extra draft assets, but I just think that this Raiders team needs players. And we've talked about this before, that I don't think the Raiders, we talked about the defense just now, and on previous podcasts, I said that I don't think the Raiders were actually that good last year. Despite that winning streak that kept them in playoff conversation for a little bit, I just don't think they were actually that good of a football team. And, a lot of it had to do with other factors that weren't the talent of the team. So I wouldn't just trying to get as many good players as I can on my team, and I'm just going to take the pick.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think they were probably maybe a 6-10, 7-9, maybe even that's a little bit hot. They weren't that great last year. I don't think they were a fringe playoff team like they ended up. Somehow they were still in contention week 17. But yeah, I think they need to add some talent. I wouldn't hate it if they did it. For me, my thing about trading back is always just been, well, it depends on the situation. I mean, if you have a great player available that's going to really help your team, then no. If you don't have a great player and you think you can get them later on, then yes. I mean, it's a pretty obvious, it depends on the situation. It's hard to do those hypotheticals. But yeah, if the situation is right, sure, why not? But as a whole, no, I wouldn't say that they should look for it. Moving on to number 20, we now have the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that, again, there's the option here to double down on receivers with Justin Jefferson still on the board, someone I think we both like a lot. I think that part of me wants to just go with the best player available, but best player available is probably DeAndre Swift, the running back, but I still don't want to. I think that would be a terrible move for the Jaguars when they're trying to rebuild to draft a running back. So I think with this pick, I am going to go cornerback here, which puts me between Gladney and Fulton. It's a tough call. I do think I will go with Jeff Gladney here. I think he's one of those guys. He's not the biggest of guys, but he's pretty much good at everything else. I think that he's a pretty good corner. I do think Jacksonville, they need some work on basically just everything. So I think this pick makes sense to me. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I like the pick. I had Christian Fulton above him on my board as far as quarterbacks go, but I do like his game still, and I think that's a fair pick. Like I said, it just depends on which one of the guys you like more. So that's a fair pick for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest worry I have is that he is 6 feet, which is pretty tall for a corner, only 180 pounds, so he's very skinny. But I just think that he has very little weaknesses. I think he can be a very good corner, so that's why I made that selection.
Yep. So we're moving on to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia's obvious need has been receiver. I feel like for a while now, and so I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson, big-bodied, really fast receiver. He had a great year at LSU. I feel like this is an obvious pick for me at 21. I'm going to go with. I feel like the next few teams could honestly use a wide receiver, so I'm going to make sure I get my guy. So Justin Jefferson's going to go to the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean that's a good pick. I think Patriots the people in the Patriots Zoom meeting are going to be very frustrated once that pick gets selected. I do think that it's a good pick. It's kind of one of those things where good value and a position of need. Sometimes it just works out that way. I think Eagles fans will be very happy with Jefferson there at number 21. We can move on to number 22, which is the Minnesota Vikings. But first, there is a question about that. Emilio the Beast spelled with a 3 instead of an E. What corner and draft do you think would fit the Vikings at 25? Well, I'm going a little bit ahead because I'm doing it at 22. But I do think that probably, I mean, quite frankly, there's only the 2 corners that we were talking about. One of them has already been selected. So Christian Fulton. So I guess there's your answer. Just whatever corner they can get their hands on. I do think cornerback is their biggest position of need at this point, and getting a good corner, there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair pick. I would love to see Antoine Winfield Jr. in Minnesota just because I enjoy things like that when Antoine Winfields are on the same team. But I mean that's going to be a reach at 22 or 25. So I understand the pick. With Fulton, I think he's a good cornerback, and I think he's going to fit into that defense nicely. And it's an obvious need for Minnesota. I actually had them going receiver first at 22, then corner at 25. But this is a fair pick this is a good pick and good value at 22.
And I think, yeah, I agree. So now let's move on to number 23, the New England Patriots. Just to set the stage, a couple of options here. Justin Herbert and Jordan Love still on the board if they want to go quarterback. You have DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins, a couple of running backs, potentially a position of need. Zach Bond, a lot of options. You could Denzel Mims, a lot of options here. Kyle, what is your team, the team that does not currently have Tom Brady? What are they going to select with the number 23 overall pick?
All right. Well, a lot of Patriots faithful are hoping for a wide receiver, which I think is lunacy because I don't think we're going to go wide receiver first round back-to-back years. I understand it's a need on the team, but Belichick hates taking skill position guys early on. I don't see him do it 2 years in a row and really 3 years in a row if we're going to count Sony Michel also. So I don't see him going wide receiver in this position, though I think Laviska Shenault would be a really good position player in need for the Patriots. I originally had for New England, but if Justin Herbert's available at 23, you're going to say, why not? You're going to take Justin Herbert and we're going to give it a try because the worst case scenario is he's not very good because, I envision Herbert going much higher than this. I'm still not a huge fan of Herbert. I don't think in college, there's a lot of games in college that I watch and it's like, why would anybody want this guy? He seems very soft. But if he's available at 23, I'm taking Justin Herbert, and I'm going to see if I can, toughen him up a little bit and get him to compete a little bit more. But, he has everything that you look for in a quarterback. He has the look of a quarterback. He throws the best ball in the draft. He's your prototypical size. He's got the strength. It's just he needs the drive sometimes. And I think if there's a place that's going to give him that drive, it's going to be New England. Go in the Patriot way. Hashtag do your job. I know it's trademark, but I'm saying it anyways. But yeah, I'm going Justin Herbert at 23.
Okay, so let the record show Kyle desperately hopes that the Patriots find a way to get Justin Herbert here in the 2020 draft. Yeah, and just because I feel like people are going to comment because we've been talking about it, why I'm not a huge Herbert fan is I just feel like more often than not, when he has to make the tough throw, he doesn't. I just think his accuracy isn't great. He is a great just thrower of the football. He kind of reminds me of a little bit of Jameis Winston in that sense, where it's like all the talent in the world, but, can throw it at the moon, but he'd miss it type of guy. I do think that Herbert is, he has the physical tools. And yeah, I mean, at 23, I can't hate on this value. It's a great value pick. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I don't hate that pick at all. I think it's very fun. So now we'll move on to number 24, the division rival of my favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. This is an interesting pick because on one hand, there's Jordan Love on the board. I'm not the biggest Jordan Love fan, but they could select him, have him be the guy to replace Drew Brees very soon. That's one option they could go. They could try to maybe go with a Kenneth Murray, a Patrick Queen. Maybe that's a bit of a reach. There's also the option of running back, which I think a lot of people will say, well, wait a second, they don't need a running back. They have Kamara. But as we've seen, them having two good running backs can be very crucial. I mean, with Mark Ingram and Kamara, that was insane. And of course, there's Kamara got hurt last year, kind of struggled at certain points. Maybe you're concerned about that. You can never have too much running back position. I'm tempted to do that. I don't actually know where I want to go right now. To me, it is between a running back or maybe a Kenneth Murray, a linebacker, which is probably their biggest position of need. I don't really know if they need that much, though. It's a tough call. You know what? What's the point of doing this if you're not going to just have some fun with it and make a fun pick every now and then? I'm going to go DeAndre Swift. I'm going to take a running back here at 24, even though it's not even a position of need. I'm going to draft a running back in the first round because I think that could really propel them and turn them from a good team to a great team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good pick. That's a ballsy pick in terms of the Saints and what they're doing. I like this is another one. I talked about the 4 tackles earlier. I think there's 3, maybe if you like Cam Akers later in the second round, 4 running backs that if you really like them, you just pick them and you don't say anything about it. You just accept it. I think the interesting thing about these running backs is I think they each do something really well, like that the other ones don't necessarily do well. But I think in this kind of offense, I think Swift or Taylor would actually work as the player that pairs next to Kamara and is that kind of can play a little more of that big style running back, that prototypical running back that takes some of the load off of Kamara's legs and limits it and gives Kamara more touches in space. I went with Kenneth Murray with this pick because I just feel like he's a tackling machine and it's the obvious need for what the Saints need. But I like the pick. I like the bravado here. I think that would really be like the mark of we're going for this. We're going for the Super Bowl this year, and I like the pick for New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly. And Kenneth Murray, he was the guy I almost picked before going with that. So now I already picked a Minnesota Vikings player. Now it is your turn. Number 25 pick, Minnesota Vikings. Who do you got?
Well, I had receiver at 22 and then secondary at 25. But seeing how you took secondary at 22, I'm just going to take Laviska Shenault. He was a really big difference maker for Colorado for a lot of years. And, Steven Montez is actually going to get drafted in this draft. At some point during this NFL draft, Steven Montez is going to get drafted. And that's just because Laviska Shenault made him look really good, and he's 6'5". So, I mean, Shenault's that good of a receiver. He was a number 1 option on a not very good team, and I think he could play just about anywhere. He does a lot of different things very well that I think he pairs next to Thielen very well, and I think this is an obvious pick now for Minnesota for me.
Yeah, no, I like that pick. I really do. He was the next receiver on my board. Receiver is their position of need. Again, we've talked about it a few times now. Sometimes things just work out, and the best player available ends up being who falls to you. I think that's one of those times. Just because, I think, yeah, like you said, 6'5", good big body receiver, and someone they need. I like it a lot. Moving on to number 26 now. This is the Miami Dolphins. I do think that there is a couple of different ways that they could go here, but I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to just go. I'm going to go with an offensive lineman here. I'm going to go with Josh Jones. I think that getting a good tackle out of Houston, again, like we've said before, the offensive line, it's a position of weakness They haven't been able to improve on it with their first 2 picks. So getting a good tackle here, someone who I think can be a starter. I don't think he's going to be like a elite type guy, but someone who can be a starter. I think there's real good value there with the pick 26.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That's the pick I also had penciled in there. I think he fills a need. They obviously really need an offensive tackle. It's someone that protects whoever their quarterback is of the future. We had Tua in this one, and I think that's a good fit for Miami and what they're trying to do.
Agreed. So moving on to number 27, Seattle Seahawks. Who do you got?
So Seahawks have a couple different positions that they can look at once again. I think edge rusher, interior offensive lineman, if they want to go with a guy like Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan. But I don't think Epineza really fits what they try to do on defense. I think they look for a little more speed on that side of the ball. So I'm going to go Zach Bond out of Wisconsin. He's really fast, really rangy linebacker who can do multiple different things. He rushes the passer really well. And I think he's a good fit for Seattle and what they do on defense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Probably what I would have done as well. It's interesting because Clowney still hasn't been signed yet. So it's so weird because it seems like he's not going to re-sign with Seattle. So assuming that he doesn't, then I think this makes a ton of sense. Bond's not the biggest guy. He's 6'2", 240. So, for an edge rusher, not the biggest, but he's fast enough to make up for it. I like that pick a lot.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on to number 28, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Again, not going to overthink this here. Ravens, they have to make sure to have a running back or this entire team is not going to work. J.K. Dobbins is on the board. I'm taking J.K. Dobbins. That simple. I mean, what do you even have to say? I think this is just a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, this is weird. I thought I was being a little different with putting this guy here at this pick. I wrote down Dobbins for this pick too. I think, like I said, there's 3 running backs that do different things really well. I think if you're looking for a between the tackles, heavy rusher kind of guy, you're going to go with Taylor. But I think the way that Baltimore runs their offense, it's a little kind of spreadish and a little bit of what they do kind of at Ohio State anyways. There's a lot of sets that are meant to get Lamar Jackson a lot of space to run. Dobbins actually fits in pretty seamlessly to what they want to do. And I actually think this is probably my favorite pick of the draft. Yeah, I like Dobbins.
You heard it here
He's actually
first.
probably my favorite
pick of the draft.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I had him penned in, and I just think that's a good pick. I think he fits that offense really well, and he's probably my favorite running back to watch out of the 3 anyways. So having him at 28 is a good pick for me.
Yes, I also agree that the favorite pick of the draft was the one that I had. So moving on to number 29, Tennessee Titans. This is your pick. What do you got here?
So I'm going with another edge rusher on this one. I think that's an obvious need, and I don't think Vic Beasley necessarily fills it. So with edge rusher, I'm going to go with Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State. I think he's gonna fit into that position really well, and he's a very fast edge rusher, and I think he's going to do a lot of good things for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that pick at all. Great job pronouncing the name, by the way. Commend you on that one. But yeah, I mean, edge rusher is a position of need. I'm like you. I think Vic Beasley, I was actually watching a lot of tape on him. I'm going to make a video on him in the near future. He, at times, will look really well. At times, he has, those splash plays, but I just don't know if he has the consistency. And plus, I mean, you need more than 2 edge rushers anyway, so it makes sense to go ahead and draft someone. I think he's a good value here. I think he definitely has the potential to be a really good player. 6'5", 266 pounds, good footwork. Not the quickest guy, but I like Gross-Matos without a doubt. And
so now we're on to Green Bay, and this is an interesting one. This is a lot of different directions. Where are you going with this?
Well, so we have a question for this one. YNW Zyron said, "Hey, I was wondering as a Packers fan how the additions of Christian Kirksey and Devin Funchess affect our pick at number 30, considering that those are the 2 positions we really need." I do think Kirksey helps to some degree, but for the wide receiver position, I don't think Funchess is going to change much. I think wide receiver, it's their biggest position of need, in my opinion. I do think that, as great as Devontae Adams is, I mean, we saw it all last year that the teams would just double Adams, and there was nothing Green Bay could do. Having a second receiver could mean so much. I have Denzel Mims going here out of Baylor, wide receiver. To me, that's just the best fit. And at this point, I don't think there's like a clear-cut best player available. So I'm going to go with best fit here and go with Mims.
Yep, that's who I had penned in as well. This is an interesting potential Jordan Love spot if you want to consider it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you get to these higher up picks when you move on from someone who you think might be great in 5 years to guys who can just help you out today. And I think receiver is a position that can often translate and have immediate impact. Receiver, and obviously running back is, running backs are better in their rookie year than any other year, but receivers can also definitely have positive impacts with that pick. And then moving on to a team that obviously at this point, we're only talking about teams that are trying to go to the Super Bowl. We have the number 31 overall pick, the team that lost the Super Bowl last year, the San Francisco 49ers. Where is your head at here with this pick, Kyle?
So this is a tough one. I feel like a lot of the positions they need have been taken off the board, but I am going to go with Antoine Winfield Jr. I think this is a little bit of a reach for the spot, but I also feel like a guy with that good of ball skills can make a huge difference for a defense. You're not going to ask him to be a lockdown corner for a team that just made the Super Bowl. You're going to ask him to come into the game and make a few plays, and I think if you're looking for a guy who can make plays, Antoine Winfield Jr. is the kind of guy who can come in and make some plays for a defense. I like the position here, and I like his ability to change a game.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't hate it. Where I would have gone here was I was thinking Jonathan Taylor because, obviously their running game, they don't need a good running back. But what if they had one? I think that there could be some logic there. That's where my head was at. Why did you decide to not make that pick?
That's a fair pick. I wasn't really tabbing San Francisco's need as running back. And like you said, they don't necessarily need a good one. I thought maybe because they got the receiver earlier, they try and bulk up that defense that's already pretty good. The one question is, do they try and go defensive line after losing I'm drawing a blank on the name. Who'd they lose this offseason?
DeForest Buckner.
DeForest Buckner, thank you. After losing Buckner, do they go with an interior defensive lineman to take his place? I don't love the interior defensive lineman at this pick, so I'm looking for a guy who can just make some plays for my team.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think this is kind of a dead spot right here where, sometimes this happens where it's not like every time there's someone that's always worth the value of a number 30 overall pick. Sometimes there's, 22 guys that are worth a top 20 pick, and then there's another 20 guys that are only worth like a pick around the 40, and you have to either draft for need or trade back. But I do think there is one guy for the Kansas City Chiefs to finish off this mock draft. I am going to go with Jonathan Taylor. They need a running back. Now they have a running back with Taylor. It's somehow they won the Super Bowl with a weakness, and I don't even hate Damian Williams. I mean, he honestly probably should have been Super Bowl MVP in a vacuum. But
yeah.
I do think that, him being a number 2 guy, you now don't have to rely on Williams to be that number 1 guy, and you can instead have Taylor be the number 1 guy. Williams can come in, who I think he fits really well as a number 2 guy anyways. This pick would make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if one team is definitely going to take a running back in the actual draft, I think this is the team. It's an obvious need. I like Taylor a lot. I think he's a really good running back. He's a really smart runner. The question for me for Jonathan Taylor is for this offense, I don't see his he needs to get a lot better in the passing game in terms of a blocker and receiver, especially with how often this team, throws the ball with Mahomes at quarterback. I feel like this is, from the 3 running backs, this is actually the worst fit for Kansas City. But this is way too early to take Cam Akers, and you might as well get, was the best running back for the past 3 years in terms of pure rushing ability. So I'm okay with the pick. I like that pick.
Yeah, agreed. And, I trust Andy Dalton. He'll figure out a way to use him correctly. So we've done over an hour now. We have our mock draft. Do you have some time for some questions real quick? Okay, we got some questions. Let's see. Let's figure out some. So we have Ethan Althoff, I think is how you pronounce it, says, what round do you think Jalen Hurts will go in, and what team? I think the Ravens should draft him and have him and Lamar on the field together. That would be quite the wild move. But Jalen Hurts, interesting guy. What? Yeah, that's a good question. What round do you think he'll go in? Do you think a team should draft him? They shouldn't draft him. What do you think?
So Jalen Hurts is the sixth quarterback on my, if I were to make a list of quarterbacks, he's sixth for me. I think if at the rate we had the quarterbacks go in this one, where we had 3 go in the first round, Love's the next guy, Eason's the guy after that, then I think Hurts is the guy after that. I think the Taysom Hill comparisons are a little disrespectful. Jalen Hurts was actually good in college, and Taysom Hill was 35 when he actually finished college. I see him as a 3rd-round pick. I think there's a lot of teams that I could see him going to as a backup. I would like to see him in offenses potentially as a backup to Minnesota or a backup to the Los Angeles Rams even. The Rams in their offense is pretty, it doesn't take a lot to be a good quarterback in that Ram system, as we've seen with Jared Goff. I think that's a spot he could be in where he's running the play action, he's finding open receivers on the play action, and I think that'd be a good spot for him later in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get him in the 3rd or 4th round, I like that. Again, I think we all agree he's probably not going to be a superstar quarterback, but he has some interesting intangibles. I do think that he could be, I think the Taysom Hill comparisons is more coming just from that's a way you could use him, because it is he's basically created his own position. We don't have a name for that position, so it just kind of, he's your Taysom Hill. I mean, Lamar Jackson was also, a lot of people don't realize this, but Lamar Jackson at the exact same time that Taysom Hill was coming into the game, when Baltimore had Joe Flacco as their starter, they were letting Lamar Jackson come into the game. People forget about that, so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think there's value there, and no one wanted to draft Lamar, and Lamar ended up being clearly the best quarterback out of that draft class. So yeah. Now we have a couple more questions, but I think that'll wrap it up. A lot of questions aren't about the draft, so we'll just keep it with this. And if we didn't answer your question today, I'll put another post up next week. Ask one then. I'll probably try to answer it. So yeah, that concludes this episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I didn't mention the name at the top of the show. Bad job, me. But Kyle, thanks for coming on. Any final thoughts?
Looking forward to the draft, even if it's going to be a little weird and, virtual, if any way we can consume more football.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, same here for me. I think I lost Kyle, but we'll just end the show. Thanks for everyone for coming on. Kyle, you back? You back?
Yeah, I'm
back.
back.
Are you back? Okay. Well, we'll wrap up the show. Sorry for a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we got through it, most of it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And I need a close or something. Goodbye.